Thank you so much for joining us on the Canmore Trust Podcast. It's great to have you with us. We're going to be covering some difficult territory. Today we're going to be talking about suicide. We're going to be talking about mental ill health. We're going to be talking about neurodiversity. And so safety during this, and those who subsequently listen to it, this safety is very important. So please reach out if you need to. You can get us at www.thecanmoretrust.co.uk. There's a resource page there where specific questions may be asked and answered. But please reach out, and you can get us by texting Canmore to 85258. And of course, there is the national helpline provided by Samaritans, and it is 116 123. Telephone 116 123. And so to today's podcast, and I'm delighted to have someone who has become a real friend, an ally in so many ways in the work that we do at the Canmore Trust, and that's Scott Thomson. So Scott, a huge delight to have you with us today. We've journeyed together over the last couple of years. We've got to know each other probably pretty well, actually.
Yep.
You know me, I know you. But people listening and watching don't know you. So can I ask you, first of all, tell us about yourself and about your background.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for having me on in the first place. It's an honour to be here and to be part of the Canmore Trust's work. So my name's Scott. I attempted suicide on the 8th of February 2018. It was the beginning of a very long journey. Most of that journey since has been as a student. So I've been at the University of Strathclyde since 2019. In 2020, in a tutorial, I told my story to the lecturer that was taking that tutorial, and after that she invited me to join the Suicide Safer at Strathclyde group, which is a group whose purpose is to create a suicide prevention strategy for the Strathclyde community. I've been involved in that now for 4.5 years. We actually just officially launched last month, so 4.5 years worth of work is now visible for everyone to see. There's also that sense of we're just getting started as well. I'm very, very passionate about raising awareness about everything to do with suicide prevention. The education that I've had, just being involved in the work that I have, suicide intervention, prevention and postvention, there's been a lot of learning there. And I'm at the point now where I think suicide prevention it's ingrained. It's just going to be part of the work that I do for the rest of my life.
Fantastic. You're not a Glasgow man, are you? You're from further afield, slightly further afield.
Yeah, so Lanarkshire based, either north or south over the years, but Lanarkshire for the entirety of my life.
Okay.
So,
and you came through a university time when the whole COVID thing was kicking off. Did that make your time at university more difficult?
Yeah, it did. By the time I started university, so that would have been September 2019, for the kind of up until just after Christmas, kind of January, February, everything was as normal as would be expected. As we moved into 2020, that was when the university decided to kind of close campus before the official lockdown kicked off. So immediately there was a limit to me travelling. The things that I had put in place during the period from my attempted suicide until starting university, a lot of that was taken away. Just the lockdown started as well.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about 2018 and the lead up to your suicide attempt and what's happened subsequent to that to allow you to be here today?
Yeah. So the beginning of 2018 was a difficult period. The long-term relationship that I was in for 11 years came to an end, and as happens, there was conversations about like trying to reconcile and so on. There was obviously disagreements as well, but ultimately what happened for me is everything that had been familiar in my life for a long time had changed. So I'd lost all sense of security. I'd lost the home that I lived in. I'd lost my relationship. I was a really, really difficult financial position. So there was so many factors that built up to what led me to attempt suicide. I temporarily moved in with my older brother, and I think it was a reflection of how I'd been in years gone past struggling with anxiety and depression, that everyone thought the best thing to do was to leave me alone to just process, and I would reach out for help when I needed it. I didn't realise this at the time, but what I needed was actually the complete opposite. I needed connection and someone to talk to, and feeling like I didn't have that. That's what led to the suicide attempt.
I think in the time that I've been in the suicide community, and I'll come to that phrase just in a second, I've sensed that connection is hugely important.
Yep.
And it's lovely early on in our conversation today to hear that sense of connection. And doubtless there will be people who will listen and watch this podcast who will resonate completely with your story. And I guess finding connection for them might be a challenge.
Yeah.
Because we seem to live in a world where we live increasingly in isolation. And welcoming people into community is really important, which leads me to, I guess, my next point, which is that you have made an attempt on your life and survived. We have lost our son. And some people ask if we struggle with that, that we've lost, but you're still here. And I want you to know that I am hugely, hugely grateful that you're still here. Okay? And it's really important to the work of the Canmore Trust and to me personally that we bring together survivors of suicide attempts and those who have lost to suicide together into what I call the suicide community. And that term has become hugely important to us. How important is that suicide community to you?
It's been incredibly meaningful for me. Even after the attempt, up until the period where I started being a bit, we'll say, more active in suicide prevention, there was still that sense of I'm on my own here. I'm struggling through every day, and yeah, I had friends and family, but in terms of the bigger picture, I'm still struggling every day, and it felt very isolated. Travel on 6 years now, 7 years, and it's so different. There's a depth of understanding when you talk to people from the suicide community that if you haven't experienced it in some way, you don't get it. And it's been eye-opening, really. Again, like kind of the intervention, post-vention stuff especially. My original focus was prevention, and as the work went on, I get more educated, we'll say. But hearing from people during some of the work I've done at Strathclyde who have also survived, it was really meaningful to me as well. Like Cameron's story, like you and Isabel, it was my first real experience of what suicide bereavement looked like, and I actually don't have the words to describe what it felt like the first time I heard the story and meeting you and Isabel in person, and then every time since, anytime I've heard you speak, and there's that picture of Cameron, it hits me every time, and it's just there's a strength to this community that I don't think you realise until you're actually in it and talking to other people.
Yeah, and for me, it comes right back across the table at you because we've experienced that utter brokenness of losing. To hug someone like yourself and others that we've met who have survived, I can't tell you what that does to us and motivates us hugely, knowing that your family haven't had to go through what we have gone through, and we hope in the work that we do that decreasingly families will have to go through what we have gone through, because we want to make sure that suicide decreases and hopefully becomes a thing of the past. When I've heard you speak, it's very obvious to your audience that you're very open about what you share, and I really appreciate that. And one of the things you shared very openly is that you are neurodiverse. And I wonder if you could help us and help our audience by, first of all, telling us what it means to be neurodiverse, particularly with regard to viewing the world.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important question. And for those of us who may not be neurodiverse, please can you tell us what the world looks like to a neurodiverse person? Mm-hmm. And if that impacts at all, and I think it does, but how does that impact suicidal thinking?
Yeah. It can be difficult to describe, especially to kind of help people who are not neurodiverse see the world the way that I see it. Ultimately, being neurodiverse means that my brain is wired differently from most people's. I was diagnosed with ADHD in March 2022.
Now, we don't do acronyms in the podcast. You'll need to say what
What does ADHD stand for?
Attention deficit hyperactivity
That's
disorder.
the one, yeah,
That's the
that
one.
one, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was March 2022, which gave me some answers. And then just last month, June 12th, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder.
Okay.
So again, that's kind of further answers as to why do I see the world the way that I do? Why do I experience it the way that I do? And ultimately, I think being neurodiverse affects everything from the way that I think, the way that I feel. I experience emotions, as an example, very intensely. That can become very overwhelming very quickly. The world itself it's much brighter, louder and scarier than what it feels like for most people. Like you'll have seen me, I wear earplugs. Anytime that I'm not in the house, I wear earplugs to try and reduce sound. I have a pair of glasses that have got specific lenses to try and take the glare out of lights and so on. So my brain receives a lot more information, I suppose, than what neurotypical people do. And that can make life just feel very, very difficult. In terms of how that affects kind of suicidal thinking, the burnout that comes from experiencing the world the way that I do it, burnout can last like days or weeks or months, depending on what's caused it. And one of the things that I find really difficult is suicidal thinking and having suicidal thoughts and ideation is very familiar, I suppose. So when I'm in a really, really bad place, my brain goes straight there. There's no bit in the middle. And it's part of having ADHD is like having difficulties with impulse control. So there's a lot of challenges that come with like having suicidal ideation or any kind of suicidal behaviours. Communication is also one of the biggest challenges for me. There's a lot of times where I can't find the right words to explain what I'm feeling. Even before I get there, there's a barrier sometimes, this imaginary barrier that I can't seem to penetrate a lot of the time, in terms of reaching out to someone and being able to talk. Being vulnerable is difficult at times because I spend a lot of time pushing my stuff to the side so I can go on with whatever I need to go on with. This year at university has been a struggle, as an example. And I'm working my way through it. And like in the last couple of months especially, I've made a bigger breakthrough than what I have previously around being a bit more open about how I'm feeling and how that looks.
And I guess it may come as a bit of a shock to those who are listening or watching that we now know that being neurodiverse does increase the risk of suicidal thinking. And I wonder, as a neurodiverse person, what that feels like, how you react to that when those harsh statistics hit you.
It hits hard. Even the kind of the story of what led to the suicide attempt in 2018. Sitting here now, I can look at that through the lens of having autism and having ADHD be such a big impact on my life. As someone who's autistic, I really crave structure and routine. That helps me settle. It helps me function. But ADHD kind of likes novelty and new stuff. So there's a clash immediately between those two conditions. But especially in terms of structure, looking at that lens of 2018, every sense of structure and routine was gone in an instant. And I had no idea how to handle that. So when I see the statistics, I think my personal experience gives me an insight into the different things that can come up for people who are autistic or neurodiverse. And it's became a bit of an area of interest, I suppose, in terms of research work and so on as well.
And what would you say to someone listening to the podcast or watching the podcast today that they may think they're neurodiverse or they're on a waiting list, one of the famous NHS waiting lists, for assessment for neurodiversity diagnosis, who may be struggling today? What would you say to them as a fellow neurodiverse person?
I would say to them just not to give up. The waiting lists are in terrible. We're talking years for people to be screened for ADHD, as an example. I was fortunate in the way that my healthcare team kind of took care of things and so on. And the autism screening took a while again because of a waiting list, but I got there in the end. There are those who have sought private diagnosis, but there's again a clash with the NHS where they won't accept that diagnosis unless it comes from an NHS clinician. But the way that you feel is absolutely valid, and that there are people, there are groups, there are networks out there who can support you. There's a lot of emphasis for some of those groups where like self-diagnosis is valid. if you feel that you are that sense of being so different and your brain works a different way, all you need to do is say that I think I have ADHD or autism, and there's people there who can help support you through that.
Great. That's really, really helpful. You've said to me previously that you can still have suicidal thoughts, and that you've clearly also made an attempt on your life. That's clear from the story that you tell. So can I ask this question, because I think this would be helpful for our audience to understand. What for you is the difference between suicidal thinking and suicidal planning? We know in Scotland, from a major study that was done, that 1 in 5 young people in Scotland under the age of 35 will have an episode of significant suicidal thinking.
Yep.
Really, that doesn't then translate into suicidal planning for all those people. So what is the difference between suicidal thinking and suicidal planning?
For me, suicidal thinking, again, it's a very automatic process, but it is that. It's thinking of suicide. I don't want to be here. I can't take this anymore. The rumination on that can last for hours or days or weeks, depending on someone's circumstances. The difference with planning is that it becomes intent. There is an intent to take your own life. You actually start thinking and planning in detail what method would you use. Like that sense of, I can't take this pain anymore. This is the only option that's left to me. So one is thoughts which don't result in action, and the other is planning with the intent to take your own life.
Okay, I think that's really, really helpful. And at any stage, whether thinking or planning, I guess your suggestion is that people would reach out for help and have a discussion with someone about that.
Especially in the thinking stage, there's a lot more room, I suppose, for talking. So if you're at the stage where you're having suicidal thoughts, that's probably arguably the best time to reach out and talk to someone, because that can really be helpful. Even when you get to the intent and the planning stage, there's still time. The thing that certainly triggered my attempt was that feeling of loneliness and that no one cares and there's no one out there. If there's one thing that I've learnt through all the years since, it doesn't matter if it's a stranger from the Canmore Trust or from Samaritans or from any other organisation. There are people out there who care. They genuinely care about you and they want you to stay.
Great. Fantastic. I think that's really helpful. From my own experience, I had my own suicidal planning, my own suicidal journey. And then as I came out of that, there were still days when I didn't want to take my life. I didn't want to die by suicide, but I still felt as if I didn't want to be here. Is that something you relate to? Is that do you think that's a common feeling?
It's something that's very, very familiar to me. There's lots of different things in my life now that have given me hope or given me a reason to stay. But there are still going to be times where I struggle so significantly that I go to that familiar place and that thought comes into my head of, I want to escape this pain. I don't want to keep doing this.
Yeah.
But I've got to a point now where I've recognised that I need to talk. I've used the text service before, because I really, really don't like talking on the phone. And I think what some people might miss is there's a whole variety of different ways of communicating with people, whether it's phone call, text message, going and chapping somebody's door. There's always someone that's there. That feeling when you're in your bedroom, feeling like you're entirely on your own, it isn't necessarily true. It feels like it is at the time, but there are people who are waiting. But it's very familiar.
Well, it's interesting because our texting service is used a lot, and it's used a lot by people from the neurodiverse community. So texting for them has genuinely become a lifeline because they don't want to talk to someone. They want to text to someone. And the other group that have used our text service a lot are people from the LGBTQ plus community. And we've done a wee bit of work in that. And I think our understanding is that often people are rejected by society. And I can't believe I'm still saying that in 2025. And because of that suspicion of opening up to people and having been rejected, often their way in is to start with a texting service because they feel that can't reject them. And so I guess I'm pretty proud of a texting service that,
Yeah.
that allows both groups of people to find a place at least to start that journey. So, thank you for that. One of the things that I love to talk about in the suicide community is the issue of hope.
Yep.
And the thing that comes across in your story is that you didn't die by suicide. And that fills me with utter delight and joy and tears, and because Scott Thomson's still in the world.
Yep.
With all his influences and all his foibles and all his faults and all his beauty and everything else. Thank you that you're here. What stopped you taking your life?
Do you mean that in terms of what happened on the day or since?
Well, I don't need to know specifics.
Yeah.
But on the day, and then subsequently, what has kept you safe? Because there might be someone out there who listens to this or watches this who absolutely resonates with your story, and what you're about to share may be utterly pivotal in saving a life.
Yeah. So on the day, I'd sent a note, for want of a better way to put it, to the people closest to in my life, as a way of saying goodbye. That day, my older brother and my older sister had commitments at the time that message was sent. So theoretically, they shouldn't have gotten. So my brother was in a meeting, or should have been in a meeting, and my sister was going to a lecture, which was delayed by half an hour. So certainly, my sister, she mentioned kind of like that, like there was a sign, there was something that happened to make sure that we got to you in time, and that's ultimately what happened. They got to me before I was gone. Since it's like, especially in the immediate aftermath, there was many moments where I didn't think that I could keep going. The pain that I was in was indescribable. It really was. At that time, having seen a psychiatrist, I was being taken off the antidepressants that I was on, and this medication is particularly known for having very bad side effects when you're like withdrawal symptoms, sort of thing. Yeah. So I was everything that was going on already was further impacted by night terrors and waking up, crying, shivering. Like it was traumatic. It was really difficult. But even during those times, and it was difficult in the immediate aftermath, but there were still moments where I could find, no matter how small it was, there was a reason for me to stay. Whether it was the people in my life or like thinking about what do I want to achieve. For me, there was a sense of like I was broken down to nothing, and what I had was an opportunity to try and rebuild myself with the support of other people, rather than just living the way I had lived for the past 10 years, isolating myself and going through all those difficulties on my own. So that combination of people and things that I would like to achieve, like even early on, suicide prevention was something I wanted to focus on, but I didn't quite have a route to get there yet. So that definitely had an impact.
So is that finding purpose?
Ultimately, yeah. In the years since, like I mentioned, working at Strathclyde over the last 4.5 years, I've also done some work with a charity a few years ago where I went into high schools and told my story. And the original brief was like a mental health chat. And rather than this is what mental health is, I wanted to tell my story and then kind of use the time I had to challenge the assumptions that some of the teenagers in the school had, which actually worked out very well. And there was a couple of times after the session had finished, all the kids would leave and then one person would come back and want to talk to me for a few minutes about what I'd discussed and everything else. The work I've done at Strathclyde has been so meaningful. I think the original goal, the thought was on a suicide prevention strategy for students, but we quickly realised that we need to actually encompass the entire community. That includes staff, visitors, and anyone who comes to Strathclyde. So that work has been so meaningful to me over the years, despite the struggles I've had at times with getting through university, being able to stay in a healthy enough place to finish assignments and so on. I get energy from it. Like the way that working on an assignment might burn me out, that doesn't happen when I'm doing this work. It gives me energy and it makes me keep going. And that the meaning that comes from the work that I've done and that I hope to continue to do is just it's absolutely massive.
Fantastic. You once told me that the Canmore Trust had kicked ass in the suicide community, which I took as a compliment.
Absolutely.
How did you first encounter the Canmore Trust?
So that came about via the Suicide Safer work. As part of the work that we're doing, we have an external advisory group. I'd asked to attend those meetings just because I was interested in what the conversations might be, and we're years later now, and to this day, I'm still super surprised. I see just the wealth of experience and knowledge in that meeting of 20 odd people. It's incredible. Via that group, I got to speaking to you. I came to a couple of events that you were hosting or speaking at, and learned the story of Cameron and how you and Isabel have the work you have done since.
And you've been a huge supporter since, for which we're really grateful. You've been involved in suicide prevention for a number of years now. You'll have heard a lot of stories.
Yeah.
What's the story that has impacted you most on your journey?
It'll probably sound like I'm just saying this, but it is actually kind of your and Isabel's story and the story of Cameron. As I'd mentioned, that it was my first real experience of what suicide bereavement looked like. And for me, from my point of view, there was a level of grief, I suppose, after my attempt, because I was saying goodbye to the life that I'd had up until that point, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to keep going. But one of the things that I remember, and it still impacts me to this day, is the guilt that I felt hearing my family be upset and hearing the reactions to what was happening around me. And seeing the grief that you and Isabel share for the loss of Cameron was like, I'm a very empathetic person, and whilst I've not experienced what you and Isabel have, for me there's some sort of emotional touchstone where I've listened to you talk, I've listened to you both talk, I've listened to the circumstances around Cameron, and it just hits me hard every time. Like it hits me like a freight train every single time. Every time I see a picture of Cameron, that I get that pang again, for a life lost, and then looking at yourself and Isabel, and the action that you decided to take was to set up the Canmore Trust. And when I learned why you'd set up the Canmore Trust and the story behind that, it was something else that gave me a huge sense of hope. You are genuinely one of the most authentic people I've ever met in my life, and you speak, as I do, very openly. And I think those open conversations are what's needed to try and improve things and give people hope. The loss of Cameron will always be felt by you and Isabel especially, but by others now connected to the Canmore Trust. But if there was anything that I could take that's hope from that, it's that something so tragic has resulted in connection and trust and authenticity and support and ultimately change and this suicide prevention that we're aiming for.
Well, it's amazing to hear, and thank you for sharing it. Yeah, I guess what comes out of that is one of the pillars of the Canmore Trust, which is finding purpose. And as you know, the Canmore Trust is founded on two very simple principles. One is, are you in a safe space? And when you find that safe space, how can we help you to move forward to find purpose? And there is nothing that I have ever experienced in life than when feedback comes to us that a life has been saved. I can't tell you what that means. I can't tell you what that does, and that's Cammie's legacy, I guess. That there is impact and there is purpose for many lives now that would not have been had it not been sadly for his death. We then come to a difficult part in our conversation, because part of the Canmore Trust's podcast series is about accountability. So we have some big names in the podcasts. You obviously are one of those big names. By big names, I mean those involved in politics and big decision making. And this is a tough question. when I ask it. And it's a sad question that I have to ask. And that is, the numbers of suicide deaths in Scotland and across the United Kingdom are not going down. In fact, the most recent data from England would suggest that they have their highest suicide numbers since 1999. What's going on?
For me, the way I see it is there's different levels to it, I suppose, but ultimately there are systemic issues that need to be addressed in order to help people. And I'm thinking about things like living in poverty, belonging to a high risk group where the stigma attached to being any type of other is so significant that it stops people being able to reach out. There's also like suicide risk isn't equal amongst different people. There's a lot of intersections where we might need to take a closer look at what's led someone to feeling suicidal, what's led someone to act on those thoughts. Why haven't we caught them before they get to that stage? There's so many different forms of discrimination and disadvantages that people face in their daily lives. And like as an example, neurodiverse people, if you've mentioned they're at a higher risk. The LGBTQ plus community, they're also at higher risk. People who have experienced kind of racial discrimination, they're also at higher risk. There was a speaker at the Create and Hope Together conference a couple of months ago who said something that was very impactful. And what they said was policymakers and kind of like higher ups in the NHS talk about people who are hard to reach. And this person mentioned that they're actually easy to ignore. And that, as someone who belongs to a variety of different high risk groups, that's the lens that I see that through. Having had financial struggles for a significant amount of time, there's actually very little help to support someone. I'm going back further years, but even the fact that food banks exist as an example is awful. The fact that people years later still rely on them is absolutely terrible. We're supposed to be one of the richest countries in the world, and yet how many people do we have living in poverty?
Do you think we're just ignoring poverty? Do you think we just hope that it's going to go away, or that the ruling classes now couldn't give a stuff?
I think that the message that's portrayed in government often is that everyone's kind of doing okay. Everyone's like maybe middle class, and that makes those people who are in poverty easier to ignore. So because politics is politics, they need to say the right things to get into power. I understand the politics of it, but ultimately underneath that, there are so many people, and we're talking kids as well, who live in poverty, who can't put food on the table.
Well, I grew up in a council house. I'm a council house boy. And although I didn't grow up in poverty, there were certainly people around me that were in poverty, and I now recognise that as I look back. But you know, as a Canmore Trust, one of the things that we do is we visit people in their homes when there has been a suicide, if they want that. And I get really emotional when I talk about this, because I've seen situations and I've seen stuff in homes that in the United Kingdom, this rich country, over the last 3 years, I can tell you are unimaginable. And then added to that, this sense of, well, how am I going to bury my loved one because I've got no money?
Yeah.
And so these are huge things. Poverty increases the suicide risk by between 2.5 times. And you're still a young person. The other thing that we hear a lot from young people is the issue of this sense of the world being very broken. So the climate crisis, you know, what is the point of going on? Because, you know, even if I get through today, the world's going to end in 3 years' time, 30 years' time, whatever it might be. International bullying, you know, we tell our kids that you must call the bully out, and now we're completely thwarted in calling the bully out. We've got a situation currently in the Middle East which is unbelievable. Yep. And our young people seem to be in a closed loop about that and can't break out of it. Can you help them to break out of that today, or is that too big a question?
It is a big question. I'll do my best to answer it. The one of the difficulties I face as being someone who's autistic, it's kind of commonly known as kind of like having an overly sensitive sense of justice, and I actively avoid reading the news because it's just painful to read, and that's only the news. That's not even we're getting snippets of what the actual situation is.
Sure thing.
And I can imagine what that situation looks like. The number of people who have died in the Middle East, in Gaza, and kids who are being starved. It's awful. The only way that I find to keep going on is what is meaningful to me. What gives me my sense of purpose. I wish that I could just click my fingers and solve all the problems that there is in the world, but I can't. But what I can do is find ways to give my time some meaning. So if that's doing the work at Strathclyde as I have done, if that's working with the Canmore Trust, if that's talking to someone on the street just in conversation about how they might be feeling, I'm more than happy to do that.
I love that. So it's finding purpose for you. It's recognizing that the world's broken, but maybe someone else will take a bit of that and try to help that, and you're going to remain focused on the stuff that you do. I love that.
Yeah. The thing is one of the commonly said things, I think Rory O'Connor has mentioned it a lot, in all the work that he's done over decades, if it saves just one life, it's worth it. If any one person saves another one's life, then what more can you ask for, really?
Yeah. So another big, I guess, political question. Blank sheet of paper, unlimited finance. Please tell me what Scott Thomson would do to bring down rapidly the big numbers of suicide.
The immediate thing I would be looking at is kind of eradicating poverty. It's such a big trigger point, and it's something that's familiar to me as well. But I think the discussions around suicide, I think, need to start earlier than what they do. I think to some extent in high schools, for example, I think that there's a big worry, I suppose, that when we talk about suicide, it will make people think about suicide, or it will make people attempt suicide. Whereas to my knowledge, there's no evidence that supports that whatsoever.
Quite the opposite.
Yeah. So immediately I would be thinking, so we're talking about like waiting lists and so on. Put all the funding that's necessary in place, get rid of all the waiting lists. People should be able to have access to healthcare 24/7. At the moment, if someone is feeling suicidal, at times they're encouraged not to go to A&E because the A&Es are overwhelmed at the moment. So they phone NHS 24, and there's almost a series of barriers before someone might get the help they actually need. So for me, I think putting all of that into place to remove as many barriers to access to support as possible would be a massive one for me.
So getting rid of poverty,
Yep.
Huge step. But I think we can do it. We're a rich country. Yeah. And then removing barriers to those who need to seek support. And then thirdly, education within schools, colleges, universities, workplaces, I guess, as well.
Yeah. And as a last point, I can't put a number, a massive amount of resource into kind of public campaigning to try and get rid of these kind of imaginary barriers that we have between people. Like, people are judged based on like gender, their sexual orientation, the colour of their skin. There's so many barriers that are in between people that ultimately we're like, it sounds really grandiose maybe, but we're all human. We're all just trying to get through the next day in our lives. So taking out all of that kind of stigma and prejudice would work wonders. I don't know if the public campaigning really driving that message as much as we could would work, but it's the only thing that comes to mind to try and get rid of those barriers.
We love it. Well done. So that's going to take collaborative working across the sector and across the sectors.
Yeah.
How are we going to get the Canmore Trust and other charities working much more collaboratively? Help us to do that, will you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think we can do that?
I think the The work of the Canmore Trust, from what I've seen already, has been really impactful. The safe spaces work that's done by your experienced friends, it's different from what I've been aware of in the past, and ultimately, when someone's having thoughts of suicide or they're really, really struggling, the thing that they might not realise they're craving is a safe space. They need somewhere they can go to talk. And again, I can use my own experience. I won't talk to someone on the phone. Like, and you can tell me the Samaritan's number as many times as you want. I'll never phone it because I hate talking on the phone. I'm very much, I connect with people and faces. So the text service is a good option because it's still not the immediacy of talking on the phone. But I would rather talk to someone face to face and kind of be in, actually feel like I'm in that safe space. If someone's in the house, that's their safe space is their bedroom, but it's not a safe space if they're feeling like they're having thoughts of suicide. So having somewhere they can go where there are people who care is massive. So that's one of the things that I find really exciting about the work that the Canmore Trust does, is offering those spaces.
And there's work with Sam H and other people who are suggesting nooks and other places where people might, sounds like a great piece of work, where people might actually just be able to drop in their crisis and say, please, can you help me? Please, can I just have a cup of tea and a conversation? So I love that idea and that further collaborative working. Well, a sidestep for a moment, because we need to find out just a little bit more about Scott Thomson, as if you haven't told us enough. So my next question is, are you a reader? And if so, what book are you reading just now, and who's your favourite author?
I am a reader. I've been an avid reader since I was 9 years old. I think I used to drive my mum to despair at times. During my kind of younger years and getting into teenage years, I was a huge Harry Potter fan. So she'd take time off work to take me to the shop.
Did you see yourself as Harry Potter, or were you Ron Weasley?
I don't know how much I identified with any of the characters, to be honest. It was just for me, it was just a different world to live in. So she would take time off and I would read it that same day. Like, I would just, like, I'm gone. I've also got this really strange habit where I have this compulsion to read while I'm eating. So I have my dinner plate perched on my chest and I have my Kindle in my hand, and I've done this since I was like 9-10 years old. See, like when we're out eating at dinner in a restaurant, for example, I find it uncomfortable because I'm like, this isn't how I usually do this. So yes, I'm a reader, if you didn't get that message.
Okay. So what are you reading just now?
So the book that I'm making my way through just now is actually Rory O'Connor's book, When It Is Darkest. I've known Rory in a professional capacity for a few years now, but I didn't actually know that this book existed. As soon as I did, I ordered it. And do you know, I was actually blown away by just even the introduction to his book. I think there's I'll say mistake, it's maybe not the right word, but there's a point of view that I had, which was, because Rory's done this work for decades, he's untouched by it. I put him on a pedestal where he's so resilient and everything. And just that introduction chapter where he talks about his friend Claire, it shattered that illusion for me that we are actually all just people who are trying to work our way forward. And whether you work in suicide prevention or not, or whether you're someone who has suicidal thoughts or not, we are all the same in a very, very big sense. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. My favourite author, his name is Simon Scarrow. So one of my, we'll say, special interests as a neurodiverse person is Roman history. So Simon Scarrow writes a lot of historical fiction, and there's a series called Under the Eagle, which has 23 books in it now, with the 24th coming in October this year. I've read all of those books between 10 and 12 times without even trying. I've got like 3 or 4 series of books, and I literally just cycle my way around them. The only time I usually go for something different is if someone makes a book recommendation to me, then I'll go and look for something else. But like, autistic people especially like familiarity and comfortableness and all that. So there's even though I know it's coming, I still read it over and over.
Yeah. Well, wonderful, great. We'll keep reading. You're still a young person. I've referenced that earlier.
I'm not sure I believe you, but okay.
No?
I've got too much grey hair for that.
At least you've got hair. Have you any regrets or unfulfilled aspirations in your life yet? And then, really importantly, where are you going to be when you're 50 years old?
when I think about regrets, there's a level of sadness in regret for just the fact that I didn't get the diagnosis that I have now to really understand my place in the world. My life could ultimately have looked very different had that been noticed at a much earlier stage. Now, we know that neurodiversity awareness is much higher now, but back in the 90s when I was at school, it wasn't really. You were noticed for either being really hyperactive and a problem child, or you were really, really intelligent, scoring all the marks. So I spent a long time flying under the radar. And I always think what might have my career looked like had I been, I don't know, supported, I suppose, in the right way. But with that being said, I can't give too much credence to the regret of it, because ultimately everything that's happened in my life, even the seriousness and the tragic nature of attempting suicide, I am where I am today because of all of those things. So I don't know, if I'd known earlier, I might have been able to navigate better.
Yeah.
But the people that I've met in the last kind of 7 years, and the work that I've done, there's so much meaning to it that it wouldn't have happened had everything before it been different. So
the strange blessing out of brokenness, eh?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And so where, by the time you're 50, what are your thoughts? Where's Scott Thomson's life going?
But between now and 50 years old, I hope to continue to use my own experiences to kind of work in suicide prevention. I love this idea of at 50 years old, it might not be as necessary. I also want to be realistic and say, is that likely? I hope the numbers are down, but I don't know if it will be gone. I, as we've mentioned, I think we need to direct a lot more resource to it to eradicate it. Yeah. But even between now and being 50, I don't see myself as an expert by any means, but I do think of being a mentor figure or helping other people who've had these experiences realise that something that's really tragic and really impactful in your life, it can be turned around and you can help other people, and you can literally help save other people's lives.
And could that be looking, especially in neurodiversity, could that be helping those who are either undiagnosed or working on a diagnosis or having been diagnosed with a neurodiverse condition?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very much at the beginning of my journey in terms of what research into that looks like, and there is research out there, but there's a sense of, when I read certain papers and stuff, there's a sense for me that we need to dig deeper. We need to continue digging deeper. That reflected even in my recent dissertation. I could have looked at the overall psychological flexibility, that like how able someone is to adapt to their circumstances, whereas I was more interested in the sub-dimensions of it. So there's little bits that make up what psychological flexibility means. For LGBTQ plus people, for neurodiverse people, for all of these groups that are at high risk, we need to dig deeper than what the overall thing. So the overall thing tells us these people are at high risk. We need to dig deeper to find out why that is. So I would hope to continue that research in that kind of area as well.
Wonderful. You've just referenced again your Masters. You're coming to the end of your Master's degree programme in the University of Strathclyde, and Strathclyde University has been recognised as pioneering in suicide prevention. They've published their strategic plan.
Yep.
What do you think has been successful in the strategic plan?
She'll probably kick me behind for mentioning her name here, but Dr. Susan Rasmussen is the chair of the Suicide Safer Project. And although I didn't know at the time that she invited me onto the group, having her be the chair has been massively impactful into what that work's looked like. From her point of view straight away, she was very keen to involve the voice of lived and living experience. And I've been a student representative for the 4.5 years, and we've moved over that time to involving more students in those conversations. I've done some work on barriers to help seeking for international students, and again, it's just something that's not considered until it's brought into your awareness almost. So me talking to those people with lived experience really showed what impacts them, because it's a different story to what impacts me.
Sure.
So there's the principle behind that is really important, involving as many. diverse voices as we possibly can has been hugely impactful. We've also Tony come on board who took on the project full time for 2 years, and he was very much in the same vein, like very keen to utilise lived and living experience, but also setting up the project board and setting up the external advisory group. The coming together of this community, the suicide community you've mentioned, it's really helped shape the work at Strathclyde, and it's had such a massive impact that I can't describe what that looks like. But importantly as well, we also had buy-in from the principal and the leadership at the university. They recognised, and I think I'll put my hand up and take a little bit of credit, as Susan would make me. The very first presentation that I done with my story was to ask for the funding for Tony to come on board. And one of the significant moments for me was it was on Zoom because we're still in the pandemic. And I just said to everyone, I was like, if you don't mind, like, don't look at your phone, don't check your emails. I want you to just sit with me, and we're just going to sit for 10 seconds in complete silence. And we done that, and it was excruciating, and it was supposed to be. For me, that's what I wanted to happen. And even though it was over Zoom, like there was people who were upset. There was a real sense of change of atmosphere, even though we were all in different rooms. And it really made, I was making the connection between someone being alone and what 10 seconds of silence and being alone feels like. So we've been able to, the team as a whole over time, we've been able to really demonstrate the messaging, and that's allowed for the buy-in from the principal and the leadership team. So collaboratively, the entire team, and I include the external advisory group in that as well. The unique point of view that we've had in creating this strategy has what's made it so successful.
And leadership comes out very strongly in your statement. Yep. Fantastic. Well, sadly, we're coming to the end of things because I think we could sit and chat all day.
Yep.
You make conversation very easy. So one of the most important questions I can ask you as we come to the end of things is if someone is listening or watching to this that we've shared today and is planning to take their life, what would you say to them, Scott?
I would say to them that I'm really, really sorry that you're feeling that way. Despite what you might think, there are people out there who care about you. As I've said, even if it's a stranger at the other end of a phone, text messaging, telephone call, or going to speak to someone directly, there are people that care about you. And because you don't know them, you don't realise. I'm sitting here telling you today that they do. The communication methods and the numbers that are distributed for support, they're real. There are people at the other end of those means of communication who care about you and want to save your life. The pain that you're feeling is very real. It is real, and it can feel all encompassing. But if there's one thing that I've learned through my own experience, there is hope. There absolutely is hope because of that sense of connection with other people. And I think just ultimately, I know things are hard right now, but you deserve to see what tomorrow looks like.
Amazing. Yeah. Isn't that great? And thank you that you have seen what many tomorrows have looked like, and that will be true, I hope, going forward. My final question to you is, how do you stay safe every day? So it's all very well to do the chat and all the theory, but let's ground it. How does Scott Thomson stay safe every day?
I think I do a better job now at recognising the kind of warning signs and the triggers that might lead me to having thoughts of suicide. One of the things that I've learned, and it's so important, and I think it's widely underestimated, is people think that being productive means you need to be doing something. For me, productive now means taking care of myself. See if that's me having to sit in the house all day and play a computer game or read my book or whatever it means, whatever it is, to distract myself from how I'm feeling. Like, resting is probably one of the most important productive things that you can do. I struggle a lot with burnout. If I take on a lot of work, or like for uni assignments, I'm a last minute type person. So by the time I get over the finish line, I'm just completely drained. Even social situations I find quite draining at times as well. Learning how best to cope and navigate that has really been helpful. And that just, again, ultimately ties in with self-care. I also practice mindfulness. I don't practice it as often as I should, to be fair, but if we're being technical, I'm a mindfulness teacher. So I'd done a course with Martin Stepek, who's one of the kind of main voices of mindfulness in Scotland. And I actually probably should do it more in the house, but I don't. But I tend to try and do it actively, like if I go out in the garden or I'm in nature, because there's something that like taking your socks and shoes off and actually feeling the grass underneath. It feels like grounding actually means that for me.
Yeah.
The other main thing for me is Taekwondo.
And just to cause some humour, you have introduced this phrase WTF to me, which I thought growing up in Kilmarnock meant one and only one thing. But I now understand that WTF means the World Taekwondo Federation.
Yes. Yep. That just one of a few different associations. The association that I belong to is kind of separate from those, but we follow the teachings of the ITF, which is, I think it's the International Taekwondo Federation.
I don't even want to go there with that acronym, really.
Yeah. I was like, should I explain it or should I not? How many acronyms can I fit into a small amount of time? So I've been training for 6 years now, and this story is actually one that's quite meaningful to me. I actually met my instructor before I attempted suicide, so I actually attended classes for about 6 or 7 weeks before that happened, and because I moved from the house that I shared with my ex-fiance, I didn't drive, so getting back and forward wasn't an option. But I got my driver's license in January 2019. I got my car in May 2019, and I posted got my keys to my first car, and my instructor straight away was like, Taekwondo. Hello, I'm here. We're still here. So I drove over and spoke to him, and we looked at how to get me back into the school. And throughout the time before that, I had people say to me, like, there's Taekwondo schools like a 5-minute bus journey away, or and it was like, see those 6-7 weeks, the impact that my instructor and the other students at the school made was so significant for me that the only place I was going to be training was at that school. So getting
connectedness, community.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And before I attempted suicide, like, there was 6-7 weeks isn't a long time. There was no closeness, but the way that my instructor conducted himself and the students in the school, something just resonated with me a bit differently, and that's been me since. And my instructor especially has been like a real pillar of strength throughout the years that I've been training, not just in my Taekwondo journey, but all the stuff that happens externally as well. And it's ultimately led to last year, my Taekwondo school and a judo club took over a council hall. So we have like our own dojang now. Dojang is the word for the hall that we train in.
I'm glad you clarified that.
Just in case you were looking at me funny. And what's that?
What's a dojang?
So what that hall has became for me is a very safe space. And I don't have many of those spaces where I feel safe. Safety for me tends to come from the people that I'm with. So to have a place where I can go is however many times a week to train, and there's times where I'm not up to training and I'll still go, and I'll maybe help my instructor and help some lower grades with their stuff. There's lots of different routes, and my instructor's really supportive in all of that to allow me to continue.
You know, I love that, the concept of a physical safe space, because the issue for us at the Canmore Trust is this: finding a safe space can be inside your head, it can be inside your home, it may not be inside your home, it may be a very physical space outside. So you've just exemplified a great principle for us of the Canmore Trust. My final question, and I'm afraid it's one that you might not expect me to ask. Tattoos are very significant within the suicide community, and many people listening or watching might not know that a semicolon is significant because it means that the sentence is not yet finished. You're a man of tattoos. What is the significance of your tattoo?
The significance of this tattoo is a mistake that was made when I was a teenager. That's the honest answer. I hate everything about it. I wish I'd never done it.
Excellent.
But the semicolon is something that I'm actually like quite aware of. I think there's 3 different designs in my phone that I've thought about. There's one in particular that stands out, and I've thought about it, and I don't know why, but I keep talking myself back out of it. But as someone who's in the LGBTQ plus community, I seen a picture. It was a semicolon, and the background was kind of the rainbow colours of the pride flag. So that stood out for me. There's also, I'm not wearing it today because I kind of need to buy a new one. I've had it for 6 years now. There's a brand called Zox wristbands. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. So they're an American company, and they it's kind of like fabric, elasticated fabric bands, and they've done must be hundreds of different designs by now with meaningful messages and stuff. And one of the ones that I ordered and have, and I still have it, but it's worn to bits now. Like it's ready for the bin, but I'm not letting go of it just yet. It's the semicolon. It says "My story is not over," and that's something that sat with me since 2018. And sometimes that in itself can be a grounding for me. But the symbolism of that semicolon is really important.
Fantastic.
So yeah, that's...
Well, Scott, thank you so much for being with us today. Your story is absolutely not over, and it's been a privilege to talk to you today. So thank you so much for being part of this Canmore Trust podcast.
Thank you for having me on, John. It's been an honour, really.
Thank you. Thank you for being part of today's the Canmore Trust podcast. We hope it's been inspirational. We hope you've found some good things by way of messaging to take away. We care for you. And so if you have opened up in your thought process a struggle today and you need to reach out, would you please reach out? Please find us at thecanmoretrust.co.uk, and you can text us to Canmore to 85258. And please be aware from our website the various other organisations that may help you with specific questions, with specific issues that you may wish to talk through. And please remember the Samaritans with their national helpline on 116 123. Please join us again for another Canmore Trust podcast.